QASIG, I'm looking around, I'm seeing a lot of new people, even though we have kind of a smaller group. So if it's your first time, I hope you can make it again. This is the first talk that we had in the beginning of our 18th year of hosting these, and it's really been a really great experience, a good community of people who've gotten to know each other. How it kind of evolves and moves along. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's talk. We're still, we have most of our future talks booked, but we're still looking for people who are interested in participating in July's lightning talks. If you have, those are easy ways to get involved. They're little 5-10 minute talks, just what they sound like. So tonight's speaker is Pat Loughery, who is a former Quardev employee and a great guy. So if you haven't met him before, come up afterwards and say hi to him. And his talk is, as you can see, Transformational Leadership for QA Influencer, and it should be really interesting. Thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. You're welcome to go in and out and get pizza and whatever you want.
More beer. Thanks. It's been fun catching up tonight. This industry is very entertaining because you never lose people. You never lose people. You cross paths, and you uncross paths, and you cross paths again, and you make connections, and you make new reconnections. And I love that. And that happens not just with the peers that we've worked with, but that happens with the leaders that we worked for, that we end up oftentimes leading along the way. Have you had the experience yet of somebody who was your manager is now somebody that you are managing, or vice versa? Which is interesting and awkward at the same time. You learn to be careful with the stories you tell. You learn to give grace and humility to the person who you thought was terrible, who actually wasn't necessarily as bad as you thought. You learn. What I want to talk about tonight is how we learn as leaders, partially. But as we start the chat, I want you to frame in your mind one of the best leaders that you work with, and to think about what made that person an excellent leader. And as you do that, think about a word or 2 or 3 word phrase that captures why that person's a good leader. What made those people good leaders? What did you say?
Mentorship.
Mentorship. So you had a leader or manager who mentored you or others?
Yes.
Both? Okay.
Approachable.
Okay.
Charismatic.
Yeah, charismatic. When you say charismatic, what is that? How did that express itself?
The person who is influencing other people to not be like to react, to respond. It's actually to follow or follow one. Not saying actually to be with you.
Yeah. Charisma is interesting because charisma can be used for good and for evil. Charisma can be used well and can be misused. But good leaders are folks that you want to be around, right?
Yes.
They're folks that you want to be led by or be led with. Yeah. Other thoughts on what has made good leadership for you?
Supportive or encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was unique. It brought diverse background of ideas that I hadn't thought of.
So you get a different perspective.
Yeah, it made me think.
Somebody who's not in the same rut that you would otherwise have experienced.
Exactly.
Open-minded.
So they didn't know what they thought. So they weren't locked into the one way to do things that they wanted you to do.
The minor manager definitely listened to the people.
Yeah.
The people who he worked with or underneath him.
Okay.
And come to like a supporter, like he said, he's open-minded for all the incoming information or bad or good info. So.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Open to risk.
Yeah.
That's good.
Open to risk, and probably also knew when to risk and when not to risk, right?
Mm-hmm. And to allow me to risk.
Yeah. Interesting. This is an image we're building of someone that I want to work with, right? Like, is this person recruiting? Because if they are, they're going to find interesting candidates. Other things that we're missing. That's an interesting picture, I think, so far. So when you start looking at images of leadership, of course you start with Google image search, right? So leadership can be the first puppy in the pack. Let's see a little more. Can be leadership in the boardroom or the meeting. This is, so I started my career at Microsoft. I've been at other places since then. At Microsoft cracked me up when, at least in the olden days, I don't know if it still is this way, meetings were influenced by the people who could yell and argue the loudest, which takes a particular character type to do well or to not do well. I was terrible at it. I was terrible at that argumentation, which actually looks like this. I think that it's a different place these days. But leadership can also be these character traits of curiosity and attention and affection and like interest in humanity. Leadership can also be this directive. We are going this way. This is where the bus is going. Get on or get off. Actually, I've had good leaders who've done this, and I've had a lot of not so good leaders, depending on whether I thought that was the right way to go and whether I was being included. Which is, of course, the opposite of something like swarm leadership, right? We all are going together. We don't know exactly which direction that might be, but we're going to be happy when we do it. I kind of like that myself, but we don't make it very far oftentimes when that happens. Then we think of character leaders. And so here's another Google image result that comes up when you look at leadership. So as you think of who your most cherished leaders were, think about these categories and the things that we talked about early, and I want to frame that in this context. So we're talking about two things tonight. One is what is transformational leadership as a model of leadership, and then we'll talk about what does it mean for transformational leadership to occur in the QA space, in particular for folks who are leading and transforming not from above, who are leading and transforming the system without influence and without power, which I think is the particular challenge of QA, because we are the end of the release cycle, typically the low people in the totem pole, unless there's still user education people around there, usually are lower than us sometimes. But there's not a position of influence in QA in the same way that there's a position of influence in architecture and design and development oftentimes. So we'll look at both of these. So I want to start with a gaudy green colored quote. The idea of transformational leadership comes from a leadership study done by James McGregor Burns in this book called Leadership, which is an easy title to remember. I'll pass this along if anybody wants it. It's one of the classic leadership texts that's been sold, and he just looks at especially political leadership and influential leadership. And what he says in that model is that we can be leaders and we can serve and work with leaders who are functional and get things done. And we can also be and work with and serve leaders who actually change the system. And that's what he calls transformational leadership, or transforming leadership, actually, in his context. He says, transforming leaders are those who seek to create change by helping followers become better versions of themselves. They care about the team. Truly great and effective leaders do something more. They arouse people's hopes and aspirations and expectations. They convert social needs into political demands, and they rise to higher levels of leadership as they respond to those demands. What do you hear in that as an idea of leadership? Well, he followed that up with this thing, from which people pull the quote or the title "Transforming Leadership," but this is really a study of political leadership, which is also intriguing. What do you hear in this, or what captures your attention at first?
That you seek to create change by helping followers become better versions of themselves, because it would be the leader giving people an incentive to follow whoever, you for example, because this can help me be more effective at what I'm trying to do. It will help me be better, more powerful, and so if I follow you, and I grant you, honor you by following you, what I get in return is becoming better.
Good. Other thoughts or quick reflections to this point before we dig in more? Fireplace is cracking up, that's loud. I grew up in rural northwest Montana, and we had a big house that was heated by wood fires, so I feel like I'm home. But our room wasn't quite this big, so I didn't have to try to project at home. Other thoughts on this one before we dig in more?
I like how it talks about versions of themselves rather than trying to make them a better version for the company or help them be the best that they can be.
Yeah. So, have y'all worked for a leader who just wanted to do things their way and be like them as much as possible because that was their understanding of what success was? Which is not very fun. It sucks to not be allowed to be human in the context of work. I don't know about you, but I spend 3 times as much time with my coworkers during the week as I do with my wife and kids, which isn't exactly the way that I would choose to spend my time if I could. So if I'm going to spend time with folks that are not my family friends, I want that to be helpful for me as well as helpful for the company. And my priorities are in that order. And I think what's interesting about Burns's ideas is it recognizes that there is a way to lead taking into account the humanity of the people in the system. And what Burns really says is the best leaders are transforming or transformational leaders because they work within the system to better the entire system. So what he's not doing, he's not saying this is another model of leadership that competes with servant leadership or competes with other types of leadership. He's saying the best kinds of leaders are transforming leaders. And what it means to be a transforming leader at least includes these 4 things. I'm gonna, if I go over here to read, am I okay here?
Yeah,
Okay.
right up to the end of the table.
Okay, cool. I'll go here and I'll just step on. So I apologize because I knew that the background was going to be hard to read against, but it was kind of fun, so I just took it anyway. So here's what Burns says, that there's 4 elements to what it means to be a transforming leader. First is a leader who is transforming or transformational. He kind of uses the words interchangeably. There's further leadership study that distinguishes between those 2 things, but it's not worthwhile for us to talk about right now. But he says a good transforming leader has these elements. One is what he calls individualized consideration, which says the leader pays attention to what the follower needs and is a mentor and coach, I heard mentor and coach already, and listens to the concerns of the follower. So the first element is, does the leader or the manager know that they're working with human interests? The second element is intellectual stimulation. So this is the degree to which a leader challenges assumptions, takes risks, we heard both of those 2 things along the way, and solicits followers' ideas. So intellectual stimulation is the second element, and that is they build a system by which people actually learn and grow. Not just the leader, but the system. The third is inspirational motivation, which is the degree to which a leader articulates vision and says, here's where we're going, and that's an appealing and charismatic thing, and inspires others to follow. Then the fourth is an element called idealized influence, which is being a role model. Being a role model with authenticity and high ethical behavior who generates pride. Like the kind of person who is good at idealized influence is the kind of person that you are proud to work for because they're just a really good person. And because their work is fun too. So those are his 4 ideas. Now he doesn't in the book kind of lay them out distinctly like this. There's some overlapping ideas in terms of stuff, but as this idea of transforming and transformational leadership has been studied as a way to see how the system that's being led can change, those are the things that seem to pop out most. So there's a bunch of folks who've done some work, you can't see this very well, that's done some work around how do we really categorize what those things look like, and what does it really mean to be doing more around intellectual stimulation or idealized influence or whatever, and we'll look at that more in a second. But the idea is transforming leadership balances meeting the other leading the people with you and leading yourself. So it's a recognition that everything in the system has to change and grow and can change and grow, including the person of the leader and including the person of the most junior and most senior people on the team. And at least in this categorization, this comes from IT Revolution, who's the big DevOps shop, like the DevOps training shop. Creativity, growth, vision, authenticity are the 4 categories that they use for the 4 I's. So Burns then says, we're used to what we would call transactional leadership, what he calls transactional leadership. And transactional leadership is incremental improvement in the system to bring about results. And specifically, it's results-driven leadership, it's results-driven change. So transactional leaders are folks who work within the system as it exists. They're folks who want to solve challenges by finding patterns that are close to what they already know and just tweaking and changing. It's fine. They're folks who want to know a step-by-step approach and replicate that or duplicate that, and who want to minimize variations in the organization. So the transactional leadership is, let's do what functionally needs to happen to get to the next step, which often is what's needed. But he says that's different than transformational leadership, which is more upside the apple cart for our long term. So for him, transactional leadership is kind of a short-term, iterate to polish and make things better. And transformational leadership is a change of the system. It's not using the system for short-term needs. It's busting the system to make it better, where the system is the people and the process. So transformational leadership's work to change the system. They solve challenges by finding experiences that say that the old patterns don't work. So the old patterns don't work, we have to do something totally different. They want to know what has to change rather than what has to not change. And it's a leadership model that says, that's focused on maximizing teams' capacity and teams' capabilities. So it's not focused on, let's get the next thing done, but let's maximize capacity of the humans and the work group together. So that's a brief overview of what he calls transformational leadership. So thoughts so far?
Got a question.
Yes.
So in the when I look at that grid, what comes to mind is that phrase, give me the courage to change the things I can and the strength to understand to sustain what I can't. In other words, I see in some of that in the system and always wanting change. Where in there is the grid saying maybe it's better that we don't change or it's not efficient to change and be a leader in that regard, having a benefit of an organization or system? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so my understanding is, so I can talk about my ideas, I can talk about his ideas as I understand them. He's not trying to set up 2 different models to say this is the crappy way to work, this is the way that we all should be. What he's trying to say is there are project systems opportunities in which this is the best thing we can do.
Got it.
And there's systems in which this is the best thing that we can do. But he does say we tend to get trapped in this model because it's easier.
Right.
And
I see where you're going.
we get trapped in this model because it takes less energy. Like, I've been in this industry since 1989, which is a lot of years. That's 2 millennia, if you count millennia. Which sometimes I feel like I should count. But there's a lot of times I don't have any more juice to upset the apple cart again. I just need it to work for the next 3 weeks. In my current role, we have a big release coming 1st of March. I just need things to work for 7 more weeks, and then we can do some more change. The transformation hopefully has been happening before then, but we need to just sort of tweak a system that's already in place now. So he's not trying to say these are totally distinct, and really, transformational leadership is often seen as a model of leadership. It's really different than that, in that what he's trying to say is, here are habits of people who are highly effective leaders who transform systems. So it's more descriptive than prescribing this is the way we all should be, which is easily confused. Does that make sense or help?
It does.
Yeah, I feel that the field of quality with automation, which is specifically what I do,
Yeah.
in conventional practices, is the left side. It's like people make small changes.
Yeah.
Then there's BDD, which is a relatively big change, but really they were adapting this and put in this piece.
Yeah.
And BDD like goes 10% of the direction towards where we really want to go. And so I'm over on the right column, and my challenge is convincing people that there's value there.
Yeah.
But I challenge so many assumptions that I think people don't really want to hear it if I say, well, actually this didn't work, or you could do better at this, or and it's so it's my challenge, and probably a challenge that typically faces a transformational leader is that, oh, that's just too much change.
Yeah.
And we have our ideas, and I don't want to relearn everything.
Right.
It's like I'm an old man. I'm already 24.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's another strategy model idea called situational leadership, which is basically saying there are times you have to push on the gas, and there are times you have to hit the brakes.
Right.
And there are times you have to support, and there's times that you have to. I don't remember what the other piece of the grid was, but you lead differently at different phases in a project or a system or whatever. And so you might find, and we'll dig more into this later, but you might find that there's a moment in the project where switching to BDD is more this, and then it's I've just got to iterate and write test cases, and that's more like just I know what I need to do. Let's just keep doing it. And as a leader in that system, I'm really just trying to keep people's heads down and just do the same thing over and over again. We'll polish it up along the way, right? So there's phases maybe along the way. Maybe that's what you're saying.
But I was just thinking about this and thinking how contextual this can be. So it confuses people when you shift back and forth. So there's this large block of time where I work primarily in the right column.
Yeah.
And then we're getting ready for a launch, and everything has to be just locked down and consistent.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the left column saying, no, this is not the time to innovate.
Yeah.
And it confuses the hell out of people.
Yeah.
Because they thought they had me pegged.
Yeah. Right. Right. Nobody could ever have you pegged. Ian and I go back a couple of millennia. So we could spend a ton of time talking about what transformational leadership as a model looks like, but I want to just give you an image towards, here's a broad overview. And what I want to do next is to say, you can look at this from the perspective of if you're a manager of people or if you're a manager of projects or whatever, you can think about this grid. But oftentimes in QA, we don't have that type of influence. We don't have that kind of role-based influence. We're not all QA directors and managers and leads and whatever. What does it mean for us to use this kind of idea to transform a system where we don't have that positional power? Okay, so transforming leadership as a super high level thing first. Now I want to talk about for the QA influencer. Now I trust that we all know the QA piece of our work, and so I want to take a little bit of a different direction with this piece and to say, I think, I don't know if this is helpful for you as it is for me. What's been helpful for me is flipping on its side the influence that I have over my peers, away from influence based upon position and authority, even though I'm a manager in my current job, to helping the system and the people along the path of why do we want to change? Like, how can we get there together? And two things would help me with that. First is this, one of the classic TED Talks. This is my 12-year-old son calling me at the moment, so he'll be fine. He has questions about the 3D printer he's setting up in his office. Which he knows the answers to better than me, so I don't know why he's asking me. Anyway, so one of the great TED Talks is by this guy, Simon Sinek, who just writes about, we can talk about how we do things, and who we do them for, but we influence people by talking about why we do things. And so he writes this book about Start With Why, which is really about just asking questions to get to the meaning behind the work that we are doing. And he has this great quote that people don't buy what we do, but they buy why we do it. as a person in position of leadership and management, if I tell people to do something because I told them to do something, I have much less influence than if I talk through why we are doing something. And as a QA engineer, if I'm talking with my development peer, my PM peer, and saying, here's a problem that we are seeing, whether it's a bug or whether it's a system failure or whatever, here's why we think this is important. The why piece of why we think this is important is crucial, rather than just, I know better than you and I want to ruin your weekend, which is sometimes too. So starting with why, the tool that's been helpful for me in getting to the why is this idea of how might we. So how might we comes from the Stanford Design School. So Stanford D School focuses on design thinking, which is really kind of a systems thinking. How do I describe D School in 30 seconds or less? Is anybody familiar with D School? You've seen D School. How would you summarize it?
Oh, that's a good question. I really don't know the answer to that.
Totally fine. Put you on the spot. Anybody else? Anybody else want to be put on the spot? Is the D School familiar to you, or design thinking familiar to you? Can you summarize?
Gosh.
It's hard.
It's both qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah.
And if that makes an approach
Yeah.
to considering what the solution looks like and what you would involve in reaching it.
Yeah. It's kind of,
Right?
yeah, I mean, just actually design thinking would be fun to talk about in this context in a different time. But yes, it is. And it's really innovation via systems thinking rather than targeting a specific aspect of the problem. It's really recognizing a problem in the midst of the system that it lives within. There's more to it than that.
As a guess, I don't really know, but
Yeah.
it sounds like you're looking to the bigger picture. It's what I call the bigger picture. It's like the bigger context of why are we doing this and
Yeah.
what do we hope to achieve?
Yeah.
That kind of-
Yeah.
Well, it's not,
So-
sorry.
Good.
It sounds like what you're saying, because I know the whole thing that is, it sounds like it is a brainstorm, like you're getting the specs from the people, the business
Right.
ideas. In order to write test cases or
Yeah.
to plan it, you need to know the overall picture of what this product is.
Yeah.
Right? So in order to do that, you need to know what involved and what, basically it's like it's almost like writing a test plan for the presenting to the business and the developer.
Sure. Yeah.
What kind of test cases, what are we covering for this feature?
Yeah.
In and out and what we need.
Yeah, why are we prioritizing what we're doing? How does my piece fit into the entire system? Like how does I work at a large local coffee company, working on point of sale software. So my piece of the system is the register and the stuff that runs on the register, but that's a little piece of the system. If the network downstream from us or DBs upstream from us are down, we're in trouble. So part of it is troubleshooting, problem solving in the midst of recognizing that you're in a bigger complex environment. So they do this work around systems thinking, but the intriguing thing for this context for me from their work is what they call how might we, which is really a way to categorize brainstorming questions. So when you think about a problem that you're facing and how you might find a solution to that, they suggest that you walk through this idea. How might we is logically 3 pieces. The idea is you frame a question, you frame a problem or a challenge, and you ask, especially a group together, how might we solve this problem? So how assumes that there is a solution to a problem, or likely multiple solutions to a problem. Might assumes that there are multiple things that could be tried, and we assumes that there's something that can be done together. So how might we gives you a way to brainstorm with some structure that involves the group and that invites experimentation. So, by way of examples, instead of saying, I was in a meeting earlier today, we can't have any more bugs in this feature or else the VP is going to hear about it, was nearly a pull quote. We can frame that challenge differently so that actually people want to engage in the problem. So you can frame how might we is like, how might we reduce the number of defects found in production this month? How might we automate the toughest manual suite that we have in the next sprint? How might we reduce complexity in this component? Does the feel of those questions change how we might find a solution to the problem?
It feels more measurable.
Yeah. It's more measurable because there's more opportunity for possibility, for answers or possibility or whatever.
Well, it's more focused on it, right? The
Yeah.
questions, put it like that, will give you a more precise focus on how we solve the issue instead of being broad, say, we have too much bug on this feature.
Yeah.
Instead of saying that we need to reduce it, well, if you let's say, how might we reduce the number of the defects from this particular feature in this product?
Yeah.
If you say that, then people can look at it and say, okay, what feature we need to focus on? What's causing the problem?
Yeah.
Well, what feature is most broad, and we need to, effort to focus on effort to fix the issue.
Yeah.
So we reduce
Yeah.
the time the defect to that. So
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yeah.
Engineers love to solve problems, right?
Yes.
So when you're saying how
Oh.
might we, people jump at that.
If I go to my developer on a Friday, so, my favorite thing as a QA person is to go to my developer on a Friday afternoon about 4 o'clock and say, I have a probably one bug for you. I have a bug that triage on Monday morning, we'll say it's probably one, but your weekend sucks now. I can go and communicate that with, you're a moron, you wrote this bug for me and I found it and I win. Can be fun. So. Depending on your developer. But you can also frame the question in a way that is how might we discover this bug earlier? How might we see what else may be at risk? How might we as a team swarm on the complexity of this solution? All of those are different messages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if those are different messages, that's transforming not just the way that I'm communicating a bug report, but it's transforming the way that we are working together and the way that the system is working together. And so what I'm trying to tie together is this idea that transformational leadership is influence of the system for the better of the system, not just influence of the system because I want it to be that way. So this is really just a model for inviting participation and inviting experimentation, which is, so in the world that I'm in lately, we've been doing a lot of work in DevOps and Lean, and a lot of that work is set up an experiment, run it, measure it at the end, decide what to do with that, and iterate for results, which is way better than find something that's wrong, hack it, fix it, and move on and assume that it's all better. And so it's this iterative, let's make the system better, because we all know that it's not perfect, which is why we have jobs. Job security is the complexity that we work with, right? So how might we, for me, help to frame that messaging of how do we change the entire system so that the whole system is working better? Okay. So that's the bridge that I'm trying to aim us towards. Now, Nelson Mandela puts it this way. One of the most intriguing political leaders in history. Here's an old quote from him. It's better to lead from behind, he said, and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory when nice things happen. So you take the front line when there's danger, and then people appreciate your leadership. And he says it's interesting because there's lessons for leadership because the way that you herd cattle is that you lead them from behind. Now, I'm a Montana boy, I don't remember this being true. I mean, in South Africa, this is true. You find them, but what he says is you find the most able and smartest cattle and you help them lead the way. You empower the cattle to lead themselves. Now, I'm not trying to make an analogy between the test engineers that you work with in cows or the developers that you work with in cattle. You can draw that analogy if you'd like, but that's not what I'm saying. What he's saying is the best way to lead people is to empower them and let them lead, and you just kind of shape the way that they're going. And I think that's true for teams as well as it is for systems. So everybody okay? If you fell asleep, I'm almost done. Sorry. People and systems, people and systems. Too busy being a smart ass, sorry. I don't know. I was going to say something, but I don't know what it was. So, here's an exercise. I'm going to run through this twice. So I'm going to hand out, quickly as I can. If you have pens, grab them. And if you take two, each of you take 2 pieces of paper from the pads. Or if you have paper with you, that's totally fine. Super easy valuation. Actually, I'll start here. So super easy valuation.
So Pat, for me, going back to the how might we, there's a formal mechanism for that called the value scenario, which is essentially you're writing a fiction along certain lines about the nature of innovation and impact within the society in which it emerges. And so it's the same kind of idea of saying, what happens if we do this? With something that you've never seen before.
Yeah, that's good. So you get a what if, you get a play out some what if scenarios and see,
And there are the upbeat ones where, oh, everything's wonderful, we've just, cured cancer.
Right.
And then there are the downside ones that are called design noir, where it's more like, okay, we cured cancer, but now, we got people starving in the streets.
Right. Which oftentimes we don't think about the impact of what we're doing.
How can you use like transformative leadership when you're not in a leadership role?
Yeah. So I think that what I'm saying is we can transform the culture we can influence the culture in which we work by the way that we work our culture. And that transforms the system. It may not change my manager or my manager's manager, but I certainly can have an impact on my peers by treating them in a way that is human. Whether my peers are on my QA team or my devs or my designers or whatever. And so that's what I'm trying to play with here, is this idea of how might we change that system by being a member of the system without a position of influence.
Have you read Maxwell, 360-degree leadership?
Not that one.
That's a good one too, that augments some of what you said, because it is exactly that direction, down, up, peer, and understanding the context where influence as a leader. It's not, you can have a role and you can be a leader and understanding that changing capabilities.
Yeah, that's good. So what I'd like to do is to give us a way to measure some of our work in this space. So everybody should have 2 pieces of paper and a pen or a pencil or writing something. And so what I'd like you to do is I'm going to prompt you with a series of questions, and I'd like you to rate on a scale of 0 to 5 how well this fits for you. So first of all, thinking through, when you go back to think through that first person we looked at in the beginning of the talk, your most inspiring leader, the best leader that you've worked with, how would you rate them in these categories? You could also choose the worst if you'd like. That can be an interesting dystopian idea. Or your favorite or least favorite politician, but choose somebody. So, how would you rate them on inspiration and motivation, which is vision? So, 0 to 5, does this person communicate clearly where we're going? 0 to 5, this person has a clear sense of where our team will be in 5 years. Next, this person has a clear idea where the organization is going. And lastly, this person inspires the team to contribute to the goals. Sum those up. We'll move on. Actually, you can write, we'll have 4 groups of numbers, so you can write them in areas that you can come back to them. I should have said that earlier. Okay, so the next group, so we're rating this leader that we're looking at on idealized influence, which is authenticity. So 0 to 5, does this person set an example worth following? And 0 to 5, does this person demonstrate ongoing learning and professional improvement? 0 to 5 again, they create an environment of trust for the team and trust within the team. And lastly, they communicate and act honestly. So those are the 4 questions for this area. Add those numbers up. And we'll move on to the next quadrant. So far so good. I know I'm doing this fast.
So would you mind going to the previous one?
The previous one, sure.
Thanks.
So this is vision. Communicates clearly where we're going. has a sense of where we're going in 5 years, knows where the organization's going, and inspires the team to move towards those goals. Okay. So far, so good with the two groups. Okay. So the third piece is so these quadrants map to that grid that you couldn't see the text of, but I'll send out slides later. You can see that. All of this I'm stealing. I'm putting the footnotes where I'm stealing it from, but you'll see that later. So individualized consideration, which is what the summary called growth. So the leaders that you're thinking of, 0 to 5, do they exhibit genuine care for the persons on the team, for the humanity of the people on the team? 0 to 5, they offer personal support, encouragement, and development. 0 to 5 celebrates individual and team success and growth. So they celebrate success and growth. And then 4th, they demand and model a culture of improvement. Okay, so there's the 4 groups of prompts. So add those up. You should have a number from 0 to 20, theoretically. Okay. Last one is the element of intellectual stimulation. So the first one, 0 to 5, does this leader exhibit genuine care for persons on the team? In a way, that's the same thing, which means I cut and pasted, but not everything. Okay,
That was a test.
so yeah, you all have passed. Okay, so we're going to go through it. So I'm going to make these up. So 0 to 5, this person challenges the status quo. 0 to 5, this person shares decision making. And then 0 to 5, this person expects and models relentless improvement.
Could you repeat, please?
It models improvement or expects improvement. It's harder to repeat when I'm making it up. And then lastly, this person encourages innovation. Okay. So you should have 4 clusters of numbers, 0 to 20, for the person that you've been thinking of as your best leader, right? So I'm going to come back to this myself. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you where I was going to. I went back a bunch of slides. Okay, I'm freaked out. Those 4 categories match to the first cluster is how did this person do at vision? How does this person do at authenticity? The second. The third is how does this person do at growth, or leadership development? And the 4th was how does this person do at creativity? What do you notice about how that idealized leader scores in those areas? Are you finding folks that are well balanced? Are you finding folks that are just kick butt in one area but not so great in others?
One area.
One area, yeah.
Not bad.
Is the area one that you would think is particularly important to you?
No.
No? Just was an area that was, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yours was a balance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got balance.
Okay.
One was a little bit lower than the others, but not much.
Sure. Okay. What does that mean? I mean, this is these are raw, quick scores or whatever, but
What does it mean?
yeah.
A lot of
Well,
ways to be a good leader.
I would like this to be more balanced.
Yeah.
I would like more people to be balanced in many ways.
Sure.
But it's interesting how this is grouped together and how I chose the worst leader.
Yeah. Okay.
And it is scored in one area much higher than the others.
Yeah. That's interesting. When you work anywhere, and especially in this industry for a long time, you work for really good leaders and you work for really poor leaders. And one of the leaders I worked with along the way, who was probably one of the poorest leaders I worked with, everybody who's worked with this person starts the conversation with, he's a really good guy. He's a great guy to go have beers with, but as a leader, so like, you like to be around him, but you just don't want to be on the team. Which I think is something like what
Yes,
you're
that is
saying.
absolutely true.
Yeah.
The person
And it might be somebody, and we were talking about somebody else we had worked with who, brilliant, like literally wrote the book about the subject that we were studying, but not good at humans or systems. And it's difficult to work in that environment. And the best leaders typically are leaders who are strong, maybe not totally balanced, but strong in each of these areas, which is what Burns is trying to say. So other reactions before we reset this?
Oh, sure. I can't think of any really good leaders I've had, so I picked a bad one. And it's a little unbalanced, so it's really low on authenticity, which is consistent with, I thought the guy was a phony and a jerk.
Yeah.
But, so that's on the negative. It would have been better, it would have been less bad had it been balanced.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Please. As I was looking at it, I saw a little bit of a mirror.
Okay.
Kind of like, I could see, well, the reason I liked the person more was that they were more in the authenticity zone.
Yeah.
But a little less in the creativity and forward thinking zone.
Yeah.
And I could see that I went, oh, that kind of matched more where my comfort was.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I love that answer because, as much as I like balanced leaders, working for balanced leaders, I have a particular interest in, I need people to understand that I'm a human being. I need people to understand that I have good days and bad days, that I have interests outside of work, that I have a family. And it's not just work-life balance, it's I need to work with a person who knows that I'm not a cog. Because that's a big trigger thing for me. But I can work with people who are not particularly creative. That's all right. But I know other friends who are like, put me with a super creative person. I don't care if they know who my spouse is.
Right.
So, which means we have another grid for us to look at leaders that we want to work with or for, whatever. But that also leads me to the next thing that I want to do. I want to reset this. So either on the next piece of paper or on the other side, I want to go through this again. So I'm going to back up to the 0 to 5. This one. And we'll just go through the same 4 again. So now, think about yourself. Think about how would other people in your work group answer these questions about you. Okay? So looking at your vision. How would people in your work group answer, you communicate clearly where we are going? Whether you're a leader or not. Why title? A 0 to 5. 0 to 5, you have a clear sense of where our team will be in 5 years. 0 to 5, you have a clear sense of where the organization is going. And 0 to 5, what would they say about you? You inspire the team to contribute to the goals. Okay, and you can sum those up. You should be 0 to 20 again. So let's look at how they would see your authenticity. So what would they say 0 to 5 about, do you set an example worth following? Do you demonstrate ongoing learning and professional improvement? Third, do you create an environment of trust for and within the team? And fourth, do you communicate and act honestly? So sum those up as a vision of how you think your team members would see your authenticity or your idealized influence. We'll do the third group. So this is individualized consideration on growth. So how would your teammates say you would score on this 0 to 5 again? You exhibit genuine care for persons on the team. You offer personal support, encouragement, and development. You celebrate individual and team success and growth. And you demand and model a culture of improvement. Okay, so sum those up. I'm going to jump back so I can make up those 4 questions again, and then we'll wrap. So the 4 questions for the creativity thing are something like what people say first, that you challenge the status quo. That you share decision making. 0 to 5, do you expect relentless improvement? And then you are innovative. Okay, so sum those up. What do you learn in your self-evaluation and comparing that to your evaluation of your ideal leader?
Come close, kind of close to what manager, the good, the best manager I have, but I do have opposite on strongness and authenticity, because I'm more that higher than that he is. I know that I do have a sometimes conflict and fight with that leader, but because of that cases, but because he's open-minded, and I'm trying to be open-minded, so it's kind of I learned a lot from him dealing with the conflict. And I guess that's kind of self-evaluation score kind of boost that.
Interesting. Good. What else do you?
I thought the very first one was interesting because those had questions like, do you understand where the organization is going? Where it's going to go in 5 years? And that one kind of slots itself into if I'm a realist, the answer is, no, I'm not one of those. So, you know what I mean? So that, I think biases a little bit when it, unless we're director, VP, this and that, and there's probably context we're not, but you know what I'm saying? I think that one, it really, really colored it a little bit.
I get it. That could be, I mean, we could shape those questions differently such that, you know where your career is going, or you know what, something like that. But the idea is like what is vision, like how visionary are you as an influencer in your organization?
I was surprised on the self-evaluation that it was more, I thought it would be less balanced, because you tell yourself at first, you'll emphasize and you'll resonate on some of those, but you can't necessarily, and it's interesting to see, well, maybe you can in the right context. It's an interesting development.
That's cool. Good. Anything else before I ask a final question? Other reflections on that distinction between the idealized or the best leader and yourself? You got quieter for the second half.
One thing, and remember I picked a bad leader, so the numbers in the first set were really low. And
hopefully
after, so I doing myself, realized that, well, of course I write myself more, but it's better balanced. Which means maybe if you think of myself as a better leader than Mr. Bad Leader, but I don't know, it's not saying. Anyway, it seems, I agree with your thesis. I mean, it's desirable to be balanced.
Or at least not unbalanced. I think there's maybe that's a different argument, I suppose. So really the final question I have for us is how might we process the distinctions that we're seeing? How might we support a leader that needs more balance? How might we learn from that leader? How might I recognize that if I'm lacking in authenticity, how might I improve that? How might I share vision across my organization where I don't have position to do that? So the challenge I have for us is, given what transformational leadership looks like and what those elements are, how might we change? And that, unfortunately, because we are going separate directions, this turns into how might I, but build the team to help you with this. And then the last slide is just resources that I pulled from the storefront. So that's what I have for you, and I have 9 seconds. Thanks. Did we get any?
No. So if everybody, since you have pen, I'm going to pass out a card. Everybody put your name on the card.
That's how we're doing this. Fabulous gifts and presents.
You gotta come back around for that.
Nice job, Pat.
Thanks, Joe.